In a matter of minutes, the whole barn was ablaze. I learned about farm animal management, nutrition, breeding, showing, judging, selling, and even Hello everyone, welcome back to Training Tuesday. Hello everyone, this is my face. I don't show it very often and I didn't put it at the start of this video because I didn't want to shock you guys too much. But basically I thought it would be fun to try out doing face cam for training videos to give you guys something else to look at. So let me know whether you like face cam for some videos, face cam absolutely never because maybe my face is just not fun to look at. But today we're going to be reading some Christmas/winter horror stories that I found online, so all credit where credit is due, but these were free for me to look up, so I figured they're free for me to read whilst training. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? The first one here is called Snow Unicorn from a book called Christmas Stories by Blue Moon Wolf Warrior. I randomly found it by searching up, I think it was like Horse Christmas or Horse Winter Stories. So it's relatively short and I'll try to keep this to just reading, but we might comment on it a few times, you know, just for the funsies. The town was buzzing with excitement as their annual snowman competition was about to begin. Everyone took part. Fresh snow had fallen, so those who had already made their structures added to them, making them sturdy and reinforcing them. There were many structures, everyone smiling and laughing. I don't quite understand that part. I did have a quick read of this, but literally I read the first paragraph and said, I don't really understand snowman competitions, I suppose. I don't. We'll just continue. I digress. Even though it started with just snowmen, it also turned into animals. On the end, by the pine tree, stood a unicorn made of snow. Lucy patted the more snow onto its shoulders and then wrapped her bright pink scarf around its neck. I'll see you in the morning, she smiled and returned home with her mother. They both walked into the kitchen where her father had already made a hot chocolate for her. I hope we win, she smiled as she entered through the door and banged her boots on the doormat. Her father appeared from around the corner and knelt down, opening his arms open for a hug. These are not professional stories, I should quickly preface, I suppose. I also forgot to say, but make sure you sit down in a comfy position. I've got a blanket here. We have Mr. Avocado in the background. You guys have to let me names. You guys have to let me know names for Mr. Avocado in the comments below because he currently doesn't have a name. And unfortunately, I actually don't have a drink with me, but get cozy, grab yourself a drink. Maybe you're having a snack right now. Whatever you want to do to get cozy as we continue our story. I'm sure you will, sweetheart, he said, hugging her gently. Lucy ran to the island in the kitchen and took the mug of hot chocolate off the counter. The marshmallows already melted on the top, and the candy cane too had lost its red and white coloring. Ooh, I've never heard of putting candy cane into a hot chocolate before. I don't have anything to try that out. Maybe I should try that out. Let me know in the comments. Am I missing out on something? Candy canes inside of the hot chocolate. At least that's how I've read this story. By 9 o'clock, Lucy was in bed and was staring out of her window. She saw a shooting star and she wished upon it. She wished for her unicorn to come to life. The snow unicorn began to shiver. It shook its coat and the snow fell from it. The unicorn's coal eyes seemed to glitter, and its horn, mane, and tail had silver glitter falling with every moment. It took its first step and learned how to walk. It then attempted to find its creator. It finally found Lucy and stood in the garden. It looked up to her window and neighed as loud as it could. Lucy didn't wake till the second time. She rubbed her sleep-filled eyes. I was gonna do it, but I'm wearing mascara. And sat up. She was a little confused till she looked out of the window and saw her snow unicorn standing outside. Oh yes, let me just wake up to this horse and feel confused, but look out my window. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's okay. It's just my unicorn having to come to life. Everything is chill now. I'm no longer confused. I love that. It can't be, she smiled, but her eyes locked on the pink scarf. It is, she exclaimed excitedly, and ran downstairs, pulling on her small pink wellies, thick coat, and pink knitted hat. Wellies, is that British? In Australia, you would probably call them gumboots. Let me know what you would call them in your country. I think they might be known as rain boots or something. Or maybe you just call them boots. She ran outside and stood only a few meters from it. The unicorn walked over to her and pushed its snout into her hand. She giggled and smiled. The unicorn bowed before and looked at its back. Lucy excitedly climbed onto its back. Its hooves began to glow with silver dust and the unicorn began to ascend. Wait a second! Unicorns can't fly! That's a Pegasus! This must be a very special unicorn. Lucy began to become scared and hid herself in the unicorn's mane, but it looked back at her and whinnied softly, reassuring her. They were high above the town in no time. The unicorn danced and hopped from each of the clouds. The wind was cold and harsh, and she tried to cuddle up to the unicorn's heat. They flew in front of the moon and over her school. Lucy had a big smile on her face. She never thought that her wish would come true. As the sun began to rise, the unicorn knew it had to return Lucy home. It stood in her garden. Ooh, I said that weirdly, I'm very sorry. It stood in her garden once again, and Lucy dismounted. She turned to the unicorn and gave it a hug around its neck. It nickered to her and then ran back to its original place and once again froze back into snow. Lucy fell asleep, cuddling her white, and from each of the clouds, the wind was cold and harsh. She tried. For some reason we repeated. Lucy fell asleep cuddling her white and silver unicorn Teddy. At noon was the snowman competition. Lucy stood with her parents and with the unicorn. She rested a hand on its shoulder, feeling the magic of Christmas still present in it. And still model, she kept smiling at it, smiling. The judge finally came to her and awarded her first place. "That's a beautiful snow unicorn," he said, and handed over the rosette. Lucy hugged the unicorn as her parents took a photo of her. "That's one Christmas Lucy will never forget." And that is the end of our very first story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think it was rather cute. There's definitely potential. It definitely reminds me of stories that I used to read as a kid. I forgot to mention this, but I'm sorry, you guys can actually see boxes in the background. I'm sorry if the background looks messy at all. I'm currently moving out, but I just went through all of my books on my bookshelf, and I was definitely a horse girl. Let's just put it that way. I have a lot of horse books and a lot of like magical horses, and oh my gosh, the nostalgia for them. I kind of wanted to read them. I don't know if that's copyrighted for me to read them to you guys in another training time, but oh my gosh, that would be nostalgic. That would be nostalgic. Let's move on to the next story though. I just opened up my Chrome page to Team C's, so I'll take this time. Oh, it's not going to focus, is it? Oh, it's barely focusing. If you go to teamcs.org, I definitely recommend donating if you can. I myself have donated a bunch of money, and I'm actually doing a New Year's giveaway if you're watching this before 2022, because in the New Year's giveaway, we're going to be raising money for Team C's as well. So, little thing there. This story is called Why can't I speak? Why am I doing this if I can't even English sometimes? This story is called A Heartwarming Story About a Horse at Christmas, and it was sent into a website by Linda, so I'm not sure if this is an actual fictional story or non-fiction, but we're gonna read it anyways. I actually really didn't read this one at all, so let's settle back and have a good read. The young couple had made their usual hurried pre-Christmas visit to the little farm where dwelt their elderly parents with their small herds of ponies. The formatting on this webpage is a little bit annoying because it splits off half of the word. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it at all. Maybe you guys can kind of see, but if the word doesn't completely fit on the line, they completely chop it in half and like put it on the next line, so it's a little bit difficult to read, so I do apologize. The farm had been named Lone Pine Farm because of the huge pine which topped the hill behind the farm, and through the years had become a talisman to the old man and his wife, and a landmark in the countryside. The old folk no longer showed their horses, for the years had taken their toll, but they sold a few foals each year, and the horses were their reason for joy in the morning and contentment at day's end. I'm very confused by this book because from what I've read so far, it's written very well, but there's a few iffy parts of it. Maybe I just can't read. Crossly, As they prepared to leave, the young couple confronted the old folks. "Why do you not at least dispose of the old one? She is no longer of use to you. It's been years since you've had falls from her. You should cut corners and save where you can. Why do you keep her anyway?" The old man looked down at his worn boot, scuffed at the barn floor, and his arm stole defensively about the old one's neck as he drew her to him and rubbed her gently between the ears. He replied softly, "We keep her because of love. Only because of love." See, that's what I'm talking about. I got very confused for a second there. It's like they just missed out half of the story. It also doesn't have formatting at all. It doesn't have any quotations. I'm so sorry, you guys. Baffled and irritated, the young folks wished the old man and his wife a Merry Christmas and headed back toward the city as darkness stole through the valley. It's written very well, but structurally this isn't making sense. The way it's written, it makes it sound like because the young couple was irritated, they just left. But I think they don't correlate with each other. They were just baffled and irritated, but they left because they were leaving anyways. So it was that because of the leave taking, no one noticed the insulation smoldering on the frayed wires in the old barn. None saw the first spark fall, none but the old one. In a matter of minutes, the whole barn was ablaze, and the hungry flames were licking at the loft full of hay. With a cry of horror and despair, the old man shouted to his wife to call for help as he raced to the barn to save their beloved horses. But the flames were roaring now, and the blazing heat drove him back. He sank sobbing to the ground, helpless before the fire's fury. By the time the fire department arrived, only smoking, glowing ruins were left. And the old man and his wife, I don't know how to read. They thanked those who had come to their aid, and the old man turned to his wife, resting her white head upon his shoulders as he clumsily dried her tears with a frayed red bandana. Brokenly he whispered, "We have lost much, but God has spared our home on this eve of Christmas. Let us, therefore, climb the hill to the old pine, where we have sought comfort in times of despair. We will look down upon our home and give thanks to God that it has been spared." And so he took her by the hand and helped her up the snowy hill as he brushed aside his own tears with the back of his hand. As they stepped over the little knoll at the crest of the hill, they looked up and gasped in amazement at the incredible beauty before them. Seemingly every glorious, brilliant star in the heavens was caught up in the glittering, snow-frosted branches of their beloved pine, and it was aglow with heavenly candles, and posed on its topmost bow a crystal crescent moon glistened like spun glass. Never had a mere mortal created a Christmas tree such as this. Suddenly the old man gave a cry of wonder and incredible joy as he pulled his wife forward. There beneath the tree was their Christmas gift, bedded down about the old one, close to the trunk of the tree was the entire herd safe. At the first hint of smoke, she had pushed the door ajar with a nuzzle and had led the horses through it. Slowly and with great dignity, never looking back, she led them up the hill, stepping daintily through the snow. The foals were frightened and dashed about. The skittish yearlings looked back at the crackling, hungry flames, and tugged their tails under them as they licked their lips and hopped like rabbits. The old mares pressed uneasily against the old one as she moved calmly up the hill and to the safety beneath the pine. And now she lay among them and gazed at the faces of those she loved. Her body was brittle with years, but the golden eyes were filled with devotion as she offered her gift, because of love, only because of love. That was a sweet story. It definitely had potential. I enjoyed the story. It felt incomplete in a way. I'm not sure if this website had like a word count, because it was good writing. It just felt like something I would write as a first draft, read back through it and be like, yeah, my brain was not connecting the dots here. And then I connect the dots later. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I've only been recording for about 16 minutes, but I actually don't have another book. Right, we have another book here, and it's called Red, Green and Gold, A Christmas Horse Story. Every day with horses is a gift, but nothing is quite as magical as a girl getting her dream horse for Christmas, which I think is literally every single horse girl's like fantasy around Christmas time. Like literally when I was younger, if I had quite the imagination when I fall asleep. I usually try to imagine calming situations. Does that sound weird? I don't know. Let me know in the comments if I'm weird. But you just imagine yourself waking up on Christmas Day with a horse. That was the stories that I always came up with. I used to write a lot of stories, and that literally sounds like every single horse that I would write. Story that I was writing. It was about getting a horse on either a birthday or on Christmas. So let's see how this one goes. Red, green, gold. Red was his colour, a bright coppery sorrel. Green was his level of education, just a 21-month-old baby with so much left to learn. Gold was the sun-scorched, straw-like, grassy winter fields of northeast Texas that made our backdrop. Lad and me, the Christmas of 1985. I was 14, a scrawny, misfit teenager, with a head of coppery sorrel hair myself. It wasn't cool in the 80s to have red hair, and it wasn't really cool to like horses either, especially not in my rural high school, where the popular girls, decked in dark indigo Wranglers and ostrich skin boots, showed lambs, not horses. I lived on the outskirts of a mid-sized city, but due to some obscure school district zoning rules, I got bused nearly 20 miles, I don't know how long 20 miles is, I'm Australian, to a tiny school with fewer than 200 students spread over 100 square miles of farmlands and trailer parks. My primary school was about 200 kids, and it was rather small. I have no idea what 100 square miles looks like because I'm Australian. I don't really have much else to say about that. 14. Okay, so this would have been at high school if she was 14 then, in Australia. Wait, we're in America, so middle school. I don't know anything about middle school. That might sound like a perfect Texas horse country, but it wasn't. I was the lone horse hugger of my freshman class. I came to school smelling like my... Oh wait, freshman? So this is high school. I'm Australian, I'm sorry. I came to school smelling like my 14-year-old Appaloosa Rusty, whom I'd bought a few years earlier with my babysitting money. My horsiness and bright red hair, along with a bizarre passion for science and writing, made me an outcast in the little town of Sadler, Texas. Do you guys know where that is? I do not. But at 3:30 every afternoon that didn't matter. I was out the door and on my way home to ride Rusty, who lived in my 1-acre backyard with a Shetland mare, Dolly. I never had a coach. I just learned from the horse magazines I read cover to cover every month at least twice. That freshman year though, things changed. My high school offered an ag class geared towards future farmers. Against the advice of guidance counselors who wanted to push me toward an academic career, I signed up for the class. I learned about every breed of cattle, pigs, sheep and goat. I learned how to castrate cattle, pigs, sheep and goats. I learned about farm animal management, nutrition, breeding, showing, judging, selling, and even butchering. It was fascinating, but when the teacher announced that we'd have to do a year-long animal project, I chose horses. Mr. Boston was a good man, a tough and round good old boy from the heart of Texas. He knew everything there was about farm animals, but horses weren't his thing. Still, when I came to him with my horse project proposal, he kept an open mind. Perhaps he had compassion for this awkward red-headed misfit in his class. Who knows? He said to me, "You've got to do like everyone else in this class. You got to raise your animal and you got to show it in the spring." Now I don't know hardly nothing about horses. That's a double negative, isn't it? Doesn't that mean he knows a lot about horses? I do not know hardly nothing about horses, so you're going to have to convince me that you do. It was a challenge I was more than willing to accept. I was already showing Rusty in local competitions, and I'd ridden Dolly in a barrel and pole racing before, but I never raised a horse. And as a first-generation horse person, I couldn't look to my parents for training advice as much as they wanted to help. In my little local show circuit though, there was an older rider who seemed nothing short of magical. In a world where many riders yelled and fussed at their horses, she was calm and soft-spoken. She communicated with her horses in some mysterious horse whisper-like way. In retrospect, it's clear she had a true mastery of learning theory, although that term hadn't yet entered the horse world. A multiple national championship with her wonder horse Dave, a gentle black giant quarter horse, quarter horse, I love quarter horses, with I'm reading the wrong line. With one blue line, Jerry Snipes, I don't know how to read apparently. With a quiet humility in stark contrast to the collection of medals and trophies she'd accumulated over the years. Jerry had a simple training facility. Oh wait, Jerry's a person? Oh, Jerry Snipes. Oh, that's the person. Sometimes it just takes me a minute. Jerry had a simple training facility off of Highway 75 between Sherman and Denison, on land that's now the site of major shopping centres. Back then, the katydids chirped, the horses snorted and swished their tails, and the leather saddles squeaked against the faint background of passing cars on the highway as the sun baked down on her 10-acre property. She had 7 or 8 horses at a time there, and only 3 stalls in a sad little wooden barn that seemed out of context for such a high-level coach. But Jerry didn't care about image or fashion. For her, horses needed to be out in the pasture. Most of the time, those stalls were empty and her students had to march out to the field to bring in the horses. I'm not a horse person, but I'm pretty sure you still need, cover for horses? Maybe they had, little shelters in the paddocks, I suppose? Correct me in the comments if you know. Jerry took me on that year as a new student, a challenge for her. Given my background of self-learning, I was really good at some things, really awful at others. She made sure I'd grasp the basics of good riding, and especially negative reinforcement. How many times did I hear, "It's the release of pressure that trains, Krista, not the pressure"? I don't have a single clue what I just read. I'm very sorry. Once she felt that was understood, she moved me on to my next step, my ag project. I don't like how they just say ag. I feel like I need to say agricultural or agriculture. I say ag, like it's an ag class, but that just seems too, casual bogan for me for being in a book. Anyways. "I've got this colt here, this little sorrel," she said one warm September evening. "I'm going to have you train him for me for your class project." Thus marked the beginning of my equitation science writing, though I didn't know it at the time. Part of the project requirement was keeping a journal. Mr. Boston undoubtedly had no idea of the assignment he'd just given this young writer. Every day I wrote pages and pages about what I'd done with Jerry's colt, how I trained him, what he'd learned, what I'd learned. I was becoming a better rider, and even more importantly, I was becoming a better communicator with horses. Through this experience, naturally, I became increasingly attached to this curious and eager little red colt. Sometimes I'd get to the training center early, and Lad would be waiting for me. He'd whinny, and he'd climb over the fence into his pasture. We'd run and play around the trees, a kind of interspecies game of hide and seek. In hand and under saddle he progressed well, never bucking, never resisting, just going along with all I was telling him to do, through Jerry's good training advice. By December, Lad was my life. Rusty got my attention in the morning, but after school I spent every hour until sunset with this sweet guy. My horses were my only friends at the time, and I think Jerry knew it and understood it himself. Jerry's husband was a highly esteemed doctor in Sherman, but she didn't fit the mold of the small-town doctor's wife socialite? I can read. She preferred to be in her blue jeans out in the Texas dust with her horses. In the horse world, she was unique as well. She didn't train like other people did. She didn't follow the rules of breaking in her horses and dominating them, and her results in the show ring certainly set her apart. Lad was Jerry's horse, and I didn't question it. I didn't have the babysitting money saved up to buy such a nice horse. I never dreamed I could have a well-bred, fancy quarter horse like that for myself. Instead, I just took advantage of each moment with him and everything I learned, hoping to apply it to Rusty even in his golden years. When school let out for the Christmas holidays, it was a relief for me to no longer have to spend day after day being bullied for my quirky passions and my red hair. I spent every minute either writing or riding, or playing one of my many ground games with Lad. My mother had to urge me to get out of the fields and go Christmas shopping with her. Reluctantly, I relented. The Dallas Galleria displayed its spectacular festive holiday decorations with sparkle and glamour. I don't know what the Dallas Galleria is, but it sounds similar to maybe Myers in Australia. The shops played classical Christmas music and smelled like cinnamon and candles. Ice skaters spun and slid and fell and laughed around the 4-story Christmas tree. That's a big Christmas tree! I don't think I've ever seen a Christmas tree that big in Australia. Actually, wait, maybe I have. There were glittery packages and velvet-robed Santa Clauses and jingly bells and energetic shoppers in the full glory of a big city holiday season. But all I wanted was the red, green and gold waiting for me back in the pasture. We got home from the Galleria early, before sunset. My dad had stayed behind to do repairs on the barn. Happy to be out of the car and out of the city, I ran down the golden grassy hill, past the fence in the wood, across the creek, and to my little wooden barn, just big enough for Rusty and Dolly. The store door was closed. Oh, being texted. Can't read. The store door was closed, and a pretty head was sticking out of it. I thought, what is Rusty doing in the barn? He should be out. Then it occurred to me, that wasn't a speckled Appaloosa face I just saw. That was a red face. I turned and looked again, and there, looking over his stall gate at me, was the most beautiful redhead I'd ever seen. His bright eyes recognizing me, his ears perked forward in eagerness. There he was, that sweet baby in my barn. Confused and in disbelief, I turned and looked at my parents, and their faces were covered in smiles, big smiles, not the kind of happy for you smile. My computer. Hello? No, don't die on me. Sorry friends. My computer screen's just disconnected for a second. Luckily that doesn't disconnect my computer. I thought I lost all of that footage. Half an hour of me reading stories, man. Where were we? Big smiles. Not the kind of happy for you smile, but the, yes, this is a truly great moment. And yes, this is for real kind of smile. Jerry delivered him this morning, my dad said. We've been planning this for weeks. It sure was hard to get you away from him long enough to get him here. There are, I think, moments in life when joy is so unexpected and powerful that the word happy just seems absurdly out of proportion. Happy isn't what I felt looking at Lad that day in my barn. Happy didn't fit. I was elated, overjoyed, ecstatic, stunned, and curiously, overwhelmingly relieved. Although I'd never even dreamed of having that horse as my own, somehow the fact of having him there and realizing he was mine brought me a sense of indescribable peace. I needed this guy, and his timing was just right. In front of me, staring back at me, and seemingly as confused in a joyful way as I was, stood my Christmas present. Clean, beautifully groomed, and shimmering. He wasn't even wrapped. I mean, kind of hard to wrap a horse, I suppose. Jerry's special touch was the pine cone she'd attached to his furlock with satiny Christmas ribbons. They were ribbons of 3 simple colors: red, green, and gold. And that is it for our story reading. I really liked that one. That one was very touching. I'm not here to review the books, but that one just felt very random. They didn't finish the storyline of the school project, but I guess the school project was only there to get the main character attached to a horse and to tell that story of the horse was there for the main character when no one else was, when she felt at her lowest, I guess, which I think a lot of you guys might be able to relate to, even not just having a horse, maybe your favorite YouTubers, comfort streamers, things like that. When you don't fit in at school, it is so great to, I don't know, have a pet, or even now in our day and age, not 1985 like the story was setting, but we have the internet. Like, I know that I kind of relate with you guys a ton more than I might might relate to a lot of other people in my life, because not a lot of people in my life like horses and things like that, and there's just so much more of a community that you can connect to online. So maybe I'm hoping that my channel is a place that you guys can come and feel the same feeling that our main character felt with I can't remember the name, Lad. So let me know in the comments. I absolutely loved the name of Red, Green and Gold. It kind of flows off the tongue so well. That was a great story. I also really like the first story because it reminded me a lot of like a story that I would have read as a child, with like pretty pictures, you know, and the book cover would be all sparkly and have like a cartoonish kind of horse on it. Literally, I have an example of what I imagine the book cover to look like. Something like this, you know? I used to read all of these books, like, oh my gosh, this really brought back the memories. There's a lot of dust on it, don't mind that, but did you guys ever read Magic Ponies? Oh, sorry for my thumbnail, it kind of broke off. Nail check. So that was the end of this video. Let me know in the comments below what your story was, what stories I should read next if you want me to read some more stories. In fact, I mean, if you guys have stories of your own, we might do a video, a Training Tuesday, where I read your stories here. I think that would be really fun. So if you have stories that you want me to read, submit them to my business email, contactjustanotherpixel, and as the subject line, put Training Tuesday story. And send me a story or a Word document or something with your story in it, and we'll see how we go. So I hope you guys are having an awesome day or have had an awesome day, and I'll see you guys in my next video. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for your support this year in 2021. I literally cannot wait for 2022. I'm so excited for you guys. So yeah, lots of love to you guys. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.